I wanted to say that the systems are only going to get you so far, so I probably shouldn't get too bogged down on it. No, I mean, ultimately, it's not an issue of the biggest problem we have is the fact that, um, and this is not just because of technology. Technology, it gets better, and suddenly we can see more. It gets stronger, and suddenly we can see less. You know, like when television came out, everyone knew less about the world. When the internet came out, everyone knew more about the world because the television was easily controlled. So the problem we have mostly from the systems, the higher up systems, they don't matter that much. Honest to God, they don't. Is that they are confusing and using media and whatnot to make it so impossible to see your neighbor and see the grass when you go outside and understand what you're looking at. No, really, the solutions are all personal, individual, and grassroots, which is what I'm trying to say about monarchy, anyways. It's not so much about, oh, we need a system of kingship and whatnot. Monarchy came about that way, anyways. It's about the fact that men need to be able to relate to each other through bonds of loyalty and honor and integrity, familial consistency and strength that provides for generations. And that can happen even under this current system. The biggest problem is Americans are way too independent, and fathers think that they shouldn't help their own sons, and that they should just send their 18-year-old daughters out into the world to get molested in big cities, colleges. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the real problem. And I think that that's caused by usury. And I think that
not feminism.
Feminism, I think, is caused by usury. I think without usury, it wouldn't be basically one of the things usury does, and you can, if you look up to the effects of capitalism, something like that, you just look at like Adam Smith. So Adam Smith says, if I make an efficient factory, I can produce 10,000 pins a day, way more than a silversmith or a steelsmith would produce or whatever, a craftsman would produce. Well, who needs 10,000 pins a day? That's the problem. And so you have this production that produces way more than is needed at the expense of turning people into machines. And then it just produces garbage because no one needs these things. And so then you need just way too much of it. And then
overproduction.
Exactly.
And the tendency of profit to decline over time.
Because of usury. Yeah, because they're always trying to keep up. You can't build a factory without debt, without a loan. This system of efficiency.
The price of labor also has something to do with the profit margins of commercial enterprises. So
right. Well, exactly. Well,
the birth rate will have a bearing on the efficiency of labor.
Yeah. Well, even the idea that labor is a commodity, even that idea would not be possible without a usurious capitalist system. It wouldn't be possible. Because it's just not. It's like how do you sell time? Your minute and my minute can't be compared. Your hour and my hour can't be compared. It's evening time right now. It's just naturally different from my 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And so you really can't compute time to money, but we do it anyways. And it's the same with labor. You can't compute what a person can produce, because a person is so much more than their labor. You know what I mean? And so even those measures and whatnot are kind of, well, they're limited, and they come from scientific efficiency, and they basically cause a man, like I said, to be viewed first as a beast and then as a machine. And I've always taken advantage of that as an employee. I've always run a business on the side, and I would work for a pest control company, and from stop to stop, I'd be on the clock. I'd make calls to my to build up my own business, and because I'm just not stupid. But you put people in like a public education system, and you just teach them to never be able to do that, or to be very afraid of it. and that's just business. That's that's not talking about religion, politics, because every man he cannot pour his heart and soul into his job. He always ends up finding some other outlet. Um, does that make sense? I'm sorry, I'm always a little bit loose and rapid in the evening time. I'm not as
Right.
recollected.
So what did you mean by a man cannot? Um, what happens if he? Sorry, you said something about
So
a
he
man
can't.
cannot put everything into his work, but yes, he would have other interests as well, hobbies. You mean?
Yeah, well, it's like it's not hobbies. It's like if you take so a man is the unity of body and soul. We're a composite creature. Unlike a beast, an irrational beast doesn't have an immortal soul. It's still a composite creature with a spirit. Or an angel is only a spirit. But we
Mm-hmm.
are body and soul. So labor, and you can't separate those two. You can't get labor out of a dead body. Um, but the things that you do with your hands to produce things are important, but they're only one part of what you can valuably produce to the world. So like if I'm working on something, there's just this value in it that's much higher. And you could see a little piece of this because like if for instance I'm building a gate on my own property, or I'm spraying bugs on my own property or whatever, I'm just doing it differently because my children live here, my wife lives here, and that thing is going to last. And the next time I come to work on something, I see that gate that I built and I'm relying on it and I'm building on top of it. And that's still only one part of it. There's the whole soul, all the way from the bottom to the top, to where you're praying and communing with God directly while you labor, you know. And then there's also community. There's hospitality, there's the relationship you have with the people you're working with. And all of those things are totally washed and totally destroyed in the capitalistic system, where it's just an hourly rate and you produce 10 nets a day or whatever you're making. And there's no consideration for who you were near or what time of day it was, because they can't track that. So, which is part of the reason I think I can easily defeat the entire world banking system just by being a man that prays to God.
What about political activism in proposing the banning of usury? I think at some level, some political activism is required rather than just a desire to ban usury. I mean, isn't it the fact that you have
Yeah.
a religion that enables cooperation
Oh,
to
yeah.
do stuff?
Yeah, as far as I know, usury there was a jubilee declared in El Salvador, the Savior, because of a cooperation between Muslims and Catholics in the 90s. My best Muslim friend comes from El Salvador, and I told him about this. I want to know more about it, but the Pope was involved, and so yes, no, definitely. And the thing is about political activism, well, it's what I was just saying. If you're a unified body and soul operating in the world and not being picked apart by basically usurers that want to break apart your life so they can profit off of each part of it through time plans, then you're doing political activism while you're working. Like right now, I'm producing content. I'm meeting a new Muslim. I'm improving an agnostic, pardon me, but a completely new person who's got completely new ideas. I'm doing a bad job listening to her. And I'm working, I'm recreating, I'm praying, I'm doing a lot of things all at once, and I'm doing political activism.
Yes.
And that's
So in
how
a way,
most movements happened, I think. I mean, France is kind of weird about it, but basically, men working together and talking to each other is how things get done.
Yes, and one of the things I didn't manage to clear up was my definition of matriarchy.
Please, yeah.
Which is okay. So
I will listen
patriarchy
better.
is a society that prioritizes the preferences of married parents. Well, that's my definition. Maybe some people might
Of
want to
patriarchy?
argue. Yes, patriarchy is a society. People think it's a person, but actually it's a society that prioritizes the preferences of married parents, in contradistinction to a matriarchy which prioritizes the preferences of unmarried parents and non-parents.
That's interesting. I'm sure it's a fair definition. I have been mystically spending a lot of time thinking about, because it's like I think I said to you earlier about patrimony and matrimony, because one of the things that they trick Catholics into, conservative Catholics, into believing a lot of like dangerous errors, is they tell them, well, you have to be patriotic, you have to love America, you have to love the Ten Commandments. Don't ask what is America, it's an idea. You know what I mean? And the thing is about patriotism is it's got that same word in it of patri, which you get patriarchy, you get patrimony, which is your father's land, it's your inheritance. And so, a lot of people never stop to think, well, I don't even have an inheritance in this country. How could I possibly love inheritance, which is what patriotism would be? And so, but then you compare that to matrimony, the office of motherhood, and providing for children and nurturing children, and it's really interesting. Like I think you're right that there is, like I was saying, it's like a patriarchy would have mothers and fathers united, but matriarchy isn't really the right word, because it's not really about the matrons. It's more about the
unmarried mothers,
the sterile women. That's what it's about. It's about the women who cannot have children for one reason or another. That's who it's about.
Yes, it would be unmarried parents and non-parents. They would get priority, and that is obviously a problem.
Oh yeah, I have a theory that, well, first of all, you won't have a country for very long. You won't have people, but I have a theory that I think society is made by women, and I think that community is made by men, and I think basically women get together and they socialize and they take care of a lot of things that way, but men are the ones who take care of your actual physical needs first. So like, like for instance, if we have a problem,
to protect and provide.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm just trying to illustrate it. Like say me and my wife. If I come to my wife and I'm angry or something like that, or sad or whatever, she wants to know what I'm thinking and what's going on, what's in my mind. If she comes to me and she's angry or sad, my first thought is, have you eaten recently? Have you lost some sleep? Do you need to take a nap? Do you need to eat? And failing all that, it's like, who did this to you and how can I punish them? So anyways, I don't know. I gotta stop talking.
So we need
you tell me your thoughts. I'm gonna shut up as best I can.
So I'm thinking a gender balanced society would be a society where most households contain a married couple, so that they do not become too extreme, too feminine, too masculine, and of course, if they live apart, they're going to regard each other as the enemy. Certainly, in voting, in elections, and I know full well that Ann Coulter said that if women in America gave up voting, there would never be another Democratic administration again, and this was a sacrifice. Some women, that women should consider making, and I thought that was quite true. But she hasn't been saying much about that recently. But going back to the founding fathers, George Washington did say, not to have political parties. He did warn Americans that it will be the end of you if you have political parties, because then the nation would be riven by unnecessary divisions, which will be exploited by unscrupulous men who will climb to power because of these unnecessary divisions. And it seems now that America, I mean, the church is being divided. I've heard Americans talk about red churches and blue churches, and what kind of government policy these different color churches would support.
Yeah, well, a lot of time has passed between George Washington and today. I mean, he was dealing with a very different situation where basically the coastal cities had such a monopoly on. I mean, it was not long before the Revolutionary War ended before George Washington marched on the Irish because the Irish did not want to pay a tax. So it's like the exact reason that George Washington wanted to fight a war on George was why he crushed the Irish who wanted to resist him. So he wasn't saying like, oh, we need the country not to be divided. He was saying we need the oligarchs to be united so that they can keep these wild people under control, because we have to rule these Irishmen now. That's basically what he was saying. By the time you get, and he was wrong. I mean, it was just, there was no way to keep these people united. I mean, the difference between Virginian statesmen and a Bostoner, there's just going to be violence, and a lot of violence. I mean, especially basically as soon as the surrounding enemies are taken care of, next thing you know, Americans are killing themselves. And it's not like they didn't do that before then, but then they started doing it wholesale.
Are you talking about the Whiskey Rebellion? Just for
so I talked about George Washington, I talked about the Whiskey Rebellion, and then you get up to Andrew Jackson, because Andrew Jackson was the first president that came from a rural area that was like, he was not part of these coastal elites. He was not part of these citymen or these, you know what I mean? So that's really what George Washington was afraid of. And then, and he was probably our best president. I mean, he destroyed Bank of the United States. He's a good president. He's the only president ever paid off the debt. Now, I don't know if he's a good man or not, but he's fascinating to me. And then 30 years later, you go to war with Mexico, conquer their land, because why not? We're better than them. And then you're establishing this empire. And then basically with industrialism and whatnot, the fractions that George Washington kind of saw were going to happen in the Civil War. And a lot of different founding fathers talked about this, like Benjamin Franklin, whatnot. They talked about this is going to be the problem. They said it was slavery. Well, industrialism is a worse slavery than the chattel slavery of the South, in my opinion. At least in the chattel slavery of the South, you had a lot of, and really the slave trade between the oceans is where most of the cruelty happened. But once you're on a farmland with a dude who's just like trying to take care of his family, and you're this large, strong, hardworking foreigner who looks completely different, it's like, they basically got along with their slaves. And but after the Civil War, that whole society was destroyed. Sherman came and burned everything down, and then black people and white people both were just left adrift. And the North came in with factories and swallowed them all up and enslaved them into this mechanistic system that's only been improved on since,
Mm-hmm.
So
China seems to be quite rationally governed, and it doesn't have elections.
The trust and integrity are important, which is why I prefer to talk to you individually, and I'm happy to do that if you have the time to do that. But nobody has time and nobody has money because of usury, which is why I'm fighting usury with all my heart, with everybody I can find. And if you want to support me with your time, if you have any extra, please contact me individually. If you have to send me money to support me, that's fine. We'll find the least usurious way as possible, and you'll see a link. There are three ways that we can do this, or there are three ways that I'm working on right now. There's one bottom-up approach. I'm talking quickly for the people who don't have time. And that involves creating insular economies, which is what you will find out when you contact me individually with your extra time. That's the most important. I'm doing that locally and I'm doing that electronically, which is where you come in. The other two are top down. So you can find a user, you can cause them to repent, you can tell them about Jesus Christ, and then he should fix everything. And so we won't suffer as much. Or you can pass Jubilee laws, which you don't need to find the user or do that. It makes usury illegal. It benefits everybody who is struggling, and it will punish users or anybody who commits usury. So, which is not the people you think. Nobody knows who they are. So don't worry about you being affected by that. But I'm doing the first one. I'm researching the other two, and I'm glad to hear your thoughts.
Edited by lil-lathoS.